You're watching JCT TV. This is Bible teaching for the 21st century. You ever wonder what the will of God is for your life? I think most of us who are believers certainly do. It's a huge topic, and in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus addresses that directly, and I'm going to deal with it now. I hope I can deal with it in one show. If not, we'll bleed into the next show, but this is something that relates directly to any of us who are praying, Thy will be done. Fascinating stuff. Stay there with us. We'll be right back after this break.
This year, share Christmas by changing the life of a child in Africa. For a small donation, you'll get a new school uniform, school supplies, all purchased locally to stimulate the economy. And the whole village will join in a wow Christmas celebration, all for just $25. This Christmas, give a child a celebration they'll never forget. Wow.
Last time we looked at Thy Kingdom Come, just touched on Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There it is in verse 10 of Matthew 6. Short sentences, long meaning. Your will be done. You remember Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane? Just previous to his crucifixion, where he'd gone through a horrendous night of being accused falsely, being brought before authorities, getting no sleep. Horrible night. And there he is in the Garden of Gethsemane, just previous to all of that happening. And he's agonizing before the Lord, his Father in heaven. And even though he's the Son of God, even though he has all the capacity to call 10,000 angels to his side, he willingly takes on this burden of sin from all of mankind and knows he's going to die for the sin of mankind, knows that his death is going to be a real death, it's going to be nasty. And he says, Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me, the cup meaning just this situation. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Ultimately, friends, that is the pinnacle of prayer. Not my will, thine be done. Not my will, thine be done. 6 words. Whole histories, lifetimes, pivot on those 6 words. Not my will, thine be done. I don't know about you, but I tend to think that I know what's best for me. Are you the same? You know what's best for you? See, we think we do, because we look at what's best for us through the filter of our appetites, our needs, our dreams, our aspirations, our fantasies, our love of luxury, or our love of things, our love of travel, whatever. We see things through the filter of self-interest. And I remember when I was a kid, very, very young, but I believed in God and I was learning how to pray. I remember very earnestly for a series of weeks praying for a pony. And I figured if I just pray hard enough and pray long enough and bother the Lord enough that he's going to give me a pony. Well, of course he didn't. Not only could we not have afforded it, Dad was a preacher in a very poor little town, receiving below poverty level salary. And so just food and shelter we could never have afforded, but you don't give a 5-year-old a pony. But that was my will. And I know it's a bit of an exaggeration, but I wonder how often our requests of God are similar in that they reflect the whim of the moment. And we're very serious and very ardent about it. And we feel disappointed and sometimes even bitter when God doesn't fulfill our request. Usually what's said on occasion like that is God does not answer prayer. Well, the fact is God does answer prayer. We forget that no is just as much of an answer as yes, right? Nevertheless, we're very keen on our will. So to defer to God's will takes not only a leap of faith, but it takes a certain measure of maturity and also regard for who God is and what he can in his sovereign power accomplish. In his omniscience, he knows what's best. He knows what course our life is going to take. He knows what is going to serve our lives the best, what will serve his purposes in our lives the best. And it's usually in retrospect, we look back at a very difficult time in our lives and we see how the Lord was leading very carefully through that minefield where we thought we'd somehow been abandoned. The wonderful thing about not my will but thine be done is that God always does his will. He will not be opposed. And you can object and say, well, that means he's some kind of a dictator. Well, if you want to use that word, at least add the word benevolent. But he's far more than that. He is a loving father, as we've seen already in the beginning of the prayer. And he knows what is best for his kids. We've all had experience with this. You had mornings in public school and high school when you just wanted to sleep in. You didn't want to go to school. And you were bitter and resentful that your parents forced you out of bed and forced you to the breakfast table and forced you to school. And you must have walked or taken the bus with a glum attitude and feeling put out and put off. Eventually you get over it. And now, at this stage in your life, you're very grateful that you continued your schooling and didn't drop out and didn't obey your impulse of the moment. Well, this is often the way it is in God's working with us. He knows what is best for us. And use the analogy again, he knows it's best we get our butt out of bed and wash and brush our teeth and look decent and get to school and go through the grind of another day of study, because that is going to benefit us for a lifetime. Well, similarly with various life experiences. He's working all things to our good. Gee, it's hard to accept that sometimes. But he is. And, you know, he says, look, in all your ways acknowledge me. Seek me with all your heart. I'll make your path straight. I'll look out for you. And my perfect will be accomplished in your life if you will just get out of the way and let me do it. I guess it boils down finally to just a lack of trust in God. We don't trust him. And we don't figure that he really knows what's best for us. And so we don't want his will to be done because we think that it's an imperfect will. Big mistake. That's why Jesus adds this: thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If there is any institution that is run flawlessly in the universe, it is heaven. It's probably not in this universe, in some parallel universe, but wherever it is, it's run flawlessly. God's will is effected perfectly there, and there's no sin, there's no sorrow, there's no sadness, there's no dying, there's no suffering. It is joy and music and feasting and fun and fellowship and meaningful living all of the time. When God's will is being done, there are no gaps. There's no shortfall. Everything works seamlessly. I know it sounds a bit Pollyannish, but friends, there's enough of us out here and around the world who've experienced to a limited degree the genius of praying this prayer. For one thing, when you pray, not my will, but thine be done, it takes away from you the burden of an agenda. I no longer live with the pressure on me of what I think must be. That doesn't mean I throw up my hands passively and just kind of float down the stream. No. But what it means is I engage my heart and my mind with the heart and the mind of God, and I follow his directives, his speaking into my life, and his will is accomplished in me step by step as I walk out in faith. That's the genius of this. Not my will, thine be done, on earth as it is in heaven. All right? Verse 11. Give us this day our daily bread. This is not a passive request. We're not opening our mouths and saying, feed me, feed me, feed me. You know? That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about some little baby opening his mouth as his mother puts some more pablum in. In the original languages, and it takes some time to get to the bottom of this one. This is a kind of an obtuse concept here, but essentially what is being said here is, as I labor daily, may my labor produce its fruit. And may I have enough, not just for today, but for tomorrow. See, in Israel, to this day begins at sunset. And it ends the next sunset. Sunset to sunset is the day. So sunset comprises the first half being night, the second half being daylight. Sunset to sunset. So Sabbath, which we often think of as Saturday, actually begins Friday night. And it goes through all of Friday night and throughout Saturday until the sun sets on Saturday. When we lived in Jerusalem, we knew when Sabbath began because there's this massive horn that sounds. You can hear it all over Jerusalem, and you know that now the sun has just set and Sabbath has begun. And then on Saturday, as the sun was setting again, you would hear the horn. And from 1 minute to the next, the city changes its life. The shops open, the buses start running, people go to the restaurants. I mean, it's just like night to day to night, whatever. And so, in a sense, daily takes in 2 days, not one. That's not necessarily the full scope of the meaning here, but it is suggested there. But in a sense, our daily bread is, again, a fully dependent entity on the Almighty Sovereign Provider. If the fields are not fertile, if the rains do not fall, there'll be no daily bread. There'll be no wheat to provide the bread. And so it's an expression of total dependence on God. There's nothing more common to human life in history than bread. Bread has been made from the very earliest beginning of man's existence. We're sustained by bread. It's a good life sustainer. At least it used to be until we got into more and more refined flours, but that's another topic. Jesus is reminding us that there is life in the seed, and guess who is the giver of that life in the seed? Our Father who is in heaven. There is fertility of the soil. Who is it that provides the fertility of the soil in terms of its minerals and its nutrients? Our Father who is in heaven. There is something godly at work in the faithfulness of the sun and the rain. All of these things depend on our Father who is in heaven. And so daily bread factors in all of the natural provision that the Lord gives the just and the unjust, causing the sun to shine and the rain to fall on both the just and the unjust. So our day-to-day living is fully dependent upon Him. Now, here's the thing. This prayer, give us this day our daily bread, absolutely diminishes any presumption or assumption on our part that we are our own source and beginning. We can say we're independent. We're not independent. Just think for a minute. How dependent are you without realizing it? How much do we take for granted? We're dependent on everything from electrical and water infrastructures to traffic lights to people having to meet certain basic qualifications to be able to take a 3,000 pound or 4,000 pound vehicle out on the road and drive at 70 kilometers an hour. We're dependent upon people's consideration of each other. We're dependent upon doctors. We're dependent upon food providers, farmers especially. I mean, our whole lives just exude dependence. And so it's a real conceit, not just a fantasy, to think that we are independent, because we're not. It's amazing how quickly things can fall apart. How dependent are we on the internet these days? Well, introduce a few viruses to the internet infrastructure around the world, and whole corporations are gasping for breath. Our whole lighting grid could be sabotaged by, as it turns out, an 18-year-old hacker who was behind a lot of the major hacking episodes a few months ago in North America and around the world. 18-year-old kid. We're dependent, friends. We are dependent. So give us this day our daily bread. Speaks to that. Daily also speaks to simplicity. You know, you really don't need that much to get along. And choosing simplicity is genius. This prayer asks God to preside at the world table.
Jim Cantelon has published a Bible commentary from the genealogies of Jesus Christ to the chosen disciples. This is an exclusive and amazing work on the life of Christ. From Matthew's chapter 1 to 4, this commentary is the only way to hear Jim on what Jesus Christ did and how the Lord revealed him to us, and what that means to us every day in every way. For your copy, we ask that you send your best gift to Jim Cantelon today. You can write or call or go to the website. Send to Jim Cantelon today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7. Or call us at 519-415-8341. Or visit us at jimcantelontoday.com.
I'm going to tell you a very personal story about Give Us This Day Our Daily Bread, and this is the total truth as I remember it. My dad was pastoring a little church in Saskatchewan, and it was a very small church, and we lived well below the poverty line, but we lived with gratitude in our hearts, and I don't remember ever hearing my parents complain or being bitter about our deprivation. They always were pursuing the upward call, the far horizon. And I picked that up even as a kid, and I embraced it, the adventure of walking with the Lord. But it was a winter's day. We lived in the town, or the church, Manse, and Manse is definitely a malapropism. It was an uninsulated shack, really. We didn't even have a proper furnace. Dad built a kind of a makeshift furnace out of a 45-gallon drum, which was in the basement. The basement was just a dugout. There was no cement down there. It was just dirt that would fill with 2 feet of water in the spring. And he'd build this fire in this thing, and hot air would come up through one grate in the living room. It was a 2-story house. That was the only heat of the house. But we also had a wood burning stove in the kitchen, which would provide heat. Anyway, this one morning, I came down for school. I was 6 years of age. The school was just across the street. And I had still had my PJs on, and I walk into the kitchen, and Dad is standing there picking at the ice on the window. It was single glaze in those days, and ice would build up. And normally I would come down, and he'd have a bowl of steaming porridge ready for me, but there was no porridge, nothing on the stove. Hey, Dad, time for breakfast? Yeah, Jim, it is. Problem is we don't have any. Oh, well, give me a couple bucks and I'll run over to Fraser's General Store and get some. Well, we don't have any money either. Oh. At that point, my little brother, who's a year younger than me, came in, and then my mother, who at that point in time was 25 years of age, and she'd been crying. Dad says to us all, come, sit down. So we all sat around this empty kitchen table. And he didn't pray, one of these name it and claim it positive confession prayers. He just very quietly thanked the Lord for his faithfulness. And he said, Lord, you see our situation here, and you know exactly what our needs are. And we praise and thank you that in the past you've cared for us, and we have full confidence you'll care for us now and in the future. And so he basically blessed food that wasn't there. We got up to go back to our rooms to get ready for school. At least I was getting ready for school, and I got my jeans on, and I don't have a shirt on yet, and I hear someone knocking at the front door. Now, nobody knocked at our front door in the wintertime because it would freeze shut. Dad didn't even shovel out the pathway to the door. Anyway, I ran down, and the window up here was all frosted, and I could see the shadow of, looked like a female head with a hat on. It sounds to me like she's kicking the door with her foot. And I'm shouting to the door, can you come around to the back? Come around, the back door is this thing. But she keeps kicking the door. Well, Dad had built a bookcase right beside the door, and it used bricks. And I took out one of the bricks, and I'm hitting the ice and pulling on the handle. And finally, with my little feet against the door jamb and pulling with all my might, the door opened with a whoosh. I fell flat on my back, 40 below, air coming in. And there's a woman with a long kind of a gray-brown winter coat and a hat and a scarf with 4 bags of groceries in her arms. And she says, here, Jimmy, these are for you. I'm taking these things down, putting them on the floor, and thinking, how does she know my name? I left her standing there with the door still open. Didn't make any difference anyway. Our house was uninsulated. And I said, I'll get my dad. And I ran upstairs to get Daddy in a little office beside our bedroom. He comes down with me, and she's gone. We looked both ways. Dad was the pastor in that town. Everybody knew him. He knew everybody. I described her to him. He didn't know her. I didn't know her. I knew everybody. Never seen her before. Also wondering where she got these bags of groceries when, most of us didn't get groceries in bags in those days. Not like that. We take them to the kitchen. We unloaded stuff like we'd never seen. Not just food, but expensive food. Food that you couldn't buy in our town. Half an hour later, we're sitting around the table again with the most food I'd ever seen on that table in my life. I'm 6, okay? What did I get out of this? What was my 6-year-old interpretation? And you can take offense at this if you like, but remember, you're taking offense with a 6-year-old. My 6-year-old interpretation was, God heard our prayer and sent one of his angels to give us food. Full stop. Give us this day our daily bread. Very practical meaning. And all my life from then till now, I have believed that he will supply our need according to his riches and glory through Christ Jesus. Amen.
Remote and rural, these children and their families have no access to medical care. There is no clinic nearby. And when a mother is desperate to save her dying child, she will walk for many hours. Sometimes the child doesn't survive. So we go to them. These tables and chairs under the trees look like a gathering, not a medical clinic. But the doctors and nurses are transforming the lives of the children and their families. They provide primary medical care, classes on sanitation, medicines, and a better understanding of HIV and AIDS. Most of all, they bring hope as they diagnose, treat, and educate families. This clinic is a gift from donors that will transform their lives. You can become part of that transformation. Your gift of $25 will provide health care for an entire family. $100 provides care for 6 families. Be a part of real change. Go to wowmission.ca/saveachild.
The work of the Word of God is stunningly remarkable. We must understand that God has placed His life codes of salvation and healing in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Jim Cantelon is focused on the messages that God has communicated through the Bible to you and me. Today, it's more important for us now that we learn what God is saying to us. God has placed us here now to be examples and to share the good news of His work with the world today. If you've heard the Divine Mind speak to you through this program, then God has worked in amazing ways to reveal His Word. Remember that this program has cost, and we have been faithful to God to bring this program to you. If you want to give an offering in any amount, we would appreciate it. Send to Jim Cantelon today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7. Or call us at 519-415-8341. Or simply visit jimcantelontoday.com.
I want you to write or email or phone and ask for Cantelon's Casual Commentary. This is a little booklet I'm writing every few months that fills in the gaps. I can only cover so much in my verbal teaching on air. Eventually, when these are done, in a year and a half, I'm going to have an entire book. You'll have an entire book. Please ask for one. And come alongside me, will you, and help me make this show happen. We need your financial help. Give as much as you can. See you next time.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.